Alright. We're so fucking back. Alright. So, Lisa told me that her mom's excited for my talk, so no pressure, but here we go. So, everyone here, we've been talking about all these cool fancy things for Bitcoin. Trying to take a step back and be like, what are we doing here? Why are we even trying to do this? And, can we even do it? So, a little about me first. benthecarman, CTO of Mutiny Wallet, Lightning plus Fedimint stuff, doing that. Used to work on DLCs. Most notably, I'm a council member of the Vens, but, fuck the Bears. This will be a little bit of a Bears talk, but I promise the end will be bullish. I still stand by, fuck the Bears. But why are we here? And obviously, number go up. That's the best thing ever about Bitcoin. No one cares about anything else. We could go down some shitcoin narratives, like we got to centralize, JPEGs and cats, making a new asset class. Michael Saylor's doing DIDs and inscriptions. It's the best thing ever. But obviously, these aren't really the reasons why we're here. Yeah, that's why Tidwell's here, but everyone's a little different. I think, going back to Satoshi's vision, not to be a shitcoiner, but he kind of laid out two important things in how he set up his persona. One, in the Genesis block, we have the Chancellor on the brink of the second ballot of the banks. And then two, he set his birthday to, May 1st, which was the Executive Order 6102, where, the government confiscated all the Americans' gold. And, I think this kind of sets up, what Satoshi was kind of implying with Bitcoin, with various decisions he made, where we're trying to get rid of central banks, and trying to make money that can't be inflated, censored, stolen, or surveilled, where human freedoms have been eroded away with all this stuff, and we're trying to take it back, and Bitcoin's a great tool for that. But a lot of it is hinged on if we can actually use Bitcoin in a correct way. If we just all put the Bitcoin on Coinbase, well, we kind of lose these properties. And if we had no trust with third parties, the world would be fantastic. But sadly, doing Bitcoin self-custodially has a lot of different limitations. We're gonna try to break that down and see if we can actually get there for every single person on the planet using Bitcoin self-custodially. Why are we here today? We have 21 million Bitcoin, 8 billion people, and blocks full of JPEGs. So if we can convince Rindell to stop, maybe we'll be okay. But even without that, we still have some problems. Where are we today? Kind of like right now, the main scaling solutions is Lightning, and then we have these new things coming out like BitVM and Arc. At least what we can do today without soft forks. State chains. Okay. CatVM. Cat, we need OpCat. We don't have OpCat. Okay, you can throw state chains in here, but these are the most well talked about, and Lightning is kind of the only one that's in a large production use case on Lightning or on mainnet. So that's one I want to talk about the most, because all these other ones are kind of experimental, we haven't seen in the wild, and Lightning's fucking awesome. It's truly decentralized layer 2. A lot of these other ones are there's this ASP with Arc, or in BitVM there's these bridge operators, and you kind of have this relationship of client server versus Lightning is truly decentralized. We have these independent nodes doing all this stuff, and it's actually a really amazing to see, and probably one of the most ambitious projects ever done besides Bitcoin. And it's got awesome privacy properties for the most part, huge adoption today. There's $300 million worth of just public capacity, and then we have Async, who talks about their $100 million Lightning node by itself. So there's all these different nodes out there, and we have multiple implementations. There's 4 major ones, tons of other minor ones. It's quite amazing what's been done with this, and it's not too bad to hinge everything on Lightning. It's pretty fucking great. Problem is, it also fucking sucks. On the right here is in our Discord for Mutiny, of someone asking why their 200K sat channel is all in reserves. This is because during the halving the fees spiked up, and if you don't know, in Lightning, when you want to make a payment, you have to be able to afford that HTLC for the fees, and when fees are high enough, your entire channel is just into basically reserves. And that sucks. You also have issues you always need to be online. You have to learn about inbound, outbound liquidity. You can do all that correctly, and then something happens, you get a force close. But honestly, these are all kind of fixable. Like async payments, we can fix all the availability requirements, channel liquidity, good LSPs and all that stuff. We can kind of at least iron out a lot of that stuff. It's still there, but the UX can get better. Fee reserves, we can get like zero fee commitment transactions and hopefully one day fix the Bitcoin mempool. Force closes, we just need to write better code basically. But these are all theoretically fixable. Like Lightning can have great UX if we can scale it to all these users. But okay, we want to put 8 billion people on Lightning. Spiro Shard said, we got to run the fucking numbers. So let's see if it's actually possible to put 8 billion people on Lightning. So Cody always asks, like, you're God, King, Emperor of Bitcoin, what are you to do? So for this experiment, we're giving ourselves infinite block space. Can we still put every single person on Lightning? So we need to make a channel for every single person. How big should we make that channel? So I did some rough math last night. On-chain fees at the time were 25 sats per VByte. We assume every user is paying the whale a 5% fee for that. One input, two output channel open is about 189 sats per VByte. Ends up to about a 500 state channel cost of 500k sats. So that would be a 100k sat channel if they're willing to pay 5% fees. Okay, let's give 8 billion people a 100k sat channel. That's going to take 8 million Bitcoin. That's about 40% of all Bitcoin. So I don't have that laying around. I don't think any LSPs do. So maybe that's really bullish for the Bitcoin price. But giving everyone a 100k sat channel is not too doable. So okay, we could do like 10k sat channels if it's like 1 million Bitcoin-ish, like maybe. But like I think everyone knows 10k sat channels don't really work. So all right. Let's give ourselves infinite Bitcoin. Fuck it. We're God, King, Emperor. Let's just say we have infinite Bitcoin and infinite block space. Maybe it could work. Maybe it could work. We're just going to write it straight to the UTXO set. So we have an output size, 43 bytes. 43 bytes, it's 8 billion people. Okay, that's 344 gigabytes in the UTXO set. And just the outputs, no inputs, no transaction overhead, is 6.5 years worth of block space for the outputs. Now, you could get this number down in different ways where, this is every single person getting their own channel. Obviously, like I could open a channel to someone that counts for both. You could do some fancy networking to, get this down by a couple orders of magnitude, but this is still like clearly not going to work. And I've, given myself infinite Bitcoin and block space, which is, sadly I don't have. So, this is like where I kind of like run into the head of, man, Lightning for end users is kind of scary of like, we can't just hinge everything on this because this clearly is like really damning numbers. And so okay, Lightning for 8 billion people, screw it, we're doing Lightning for 8 million people. Maybe we can get there. Still have these awesome properties I highlighted earlier. And like I showed earlier, Lightning isn't the only layer 2. We have lots of other layer 2s we're working on, all this stuff. And it's still a great UX and decentralize everything. So we can just use it to bridge other layer 2s. So, okay, 8 billion people on other layer 2s. We got to run those numbers. Well, sadly, like we honestly can't. Like the two major ones I highlighted earlier is BitVM and Arc. We have like right now they're not deployed on mainnet really at all, and we have these like different posts about the liquidity requirements of these not being totally economical, and we haven't even seen them in the wild. So it's kind of even hard to run these numbers, and we can wait and see 5 years after Arc and BitVM and all these things have been running. Maybe then we can start to see, okay, are these numbers practical? But we're not there today, and I don't want to just like make all these. I already made a lot of assumptions, so let's not make even more. So what are we left if we just say like, those aren't usable yet, let's just use what we have today? Well, Coinbase, the largest layer 2 that's existed for 10 years, they added Lightning Network, so we could just use them, right? That's fine. Obviously not, but so we could do like other custodians that are done the right way, things like Fedimint and Cashew. I mean, these are great, but also kind of the same problem I was talking about earlier of like Arc and BitVM. Like Fedimint's been on mainnet for like 2 months, and Cashew about a year maybe. But like kind of trying to show here is all these different things are very new, and Lightning's not going to scale to everything. So we need to try lots of things. And right now the things that we are trying today are just custodial solutions. So I mean, these are done, correctly, I would say, for custodial solutions, but they're still not the best. And for Mutiny, like, this is where we're going down the path of like, Lightning works, it's great, but we run into a lot of issues, and we see like users just want things to work, and they don't want to deal about this. So we're just going down the Fediment path as like our main way to get users to use it, because it's so much easier. And then we just have the users move to self-custodial when they're ready, because it's cheaper for them, it's easier for them, and all this stuff. And getting users to actually use Lightning is hard. But the future of Bitcoin isn't bad. These are, if we never got a soft fork again, this is all we're left with. Like, these are all deploying today. We still have like, years of research that could happen to create new things and all this other stuff. These are still good, but it's not that self-custodial dream of everything we had one day. So the future can be even better. Like, we've talked about all these things about, that everyone's been talking about here this last day and the rest of the week, about cat VM and L2, L symmetry, factory lighting channels, and coin pools. Like, all this stuff could actually fix issues with Lightning or create even more versions of L2s that might be doable. Problem is, we need covenants. And this is like kind of the point of everything of why I want to do this talk is, like, Bitcoin needs covenants, otherwise we're going to do reliance on these things that are not really tested. And it's like, are we going to hinge everything on this versus just giving ourselves more and more options? Because otherwise we could be left in a world where, Fedimints are like the only thing we have. So maybe we can actually scale Bitcoin. It's, hopefully, I don't want to be too much of a bear, but I think we can actually scale Bitcoin. We just, give me covenants or give me death. So yeah, that's what I have, but thank you. I guess we can do questions. Shinobi.
Why didn't you mention state chains as an option there?
Honestly, I always forget about state chains, but but I mean, they're very weird where you trade around individual UTXOs. So like actually doing like real payment amounts seems very odd, and they still have like, they're similar to like Fediment, but they still have like trust assumptions.
Well, have you thought just about like the whole idea of Cashew and Fediment is using Lightning as like an intermint settlement layer. Mm-hmm. Like, have you thought at all about how state chains can be a little more liquidity efficient in filling that same kind of role?
How are they more efficient than Fediment?
Well, you don't have to touch chain to actually like connect new mints to that pool of like liquidity settlement, whereas with Lightning you have to have channels which require the on-chain transaction between them.
So like you use state chains between Fedimints instead of Lightning?
Yep.
I mean, yeah, like you can, so with Fediment at least today, you can have like a gateway that exists in multiple mints and just do free atomic swaps between them, which is similar. But yeah, I mean, sure, state chains is another viable option, but I think like we're going to run into the same exact like math I ran into with Lightning, where it's still, it's not a perfect solution to just use state chains. Like, I don't know if that totally answers your question, but yeah.
Boo.
Oh, we got Mike behind you.
Hello. So on Twitter, there's these two bots that engage a lot. I think one's called Brian Trolls, and another one's called Berg Alex 4. I don't actually know if they're real people or not, but they did open my mind to something called MEV, which I don't know if I don't know what that stands for, but there's this idea where here's my question to you with that context. Is it, if we do come up with a scaling solution that introduces MEV, is it better to scale and hey, we introduce some MEV that's kind of like, I think, somewhat theoretical, like we maybe have some situations where you pointed out on like Ethereum or whatever, but the question is like, is it, at what point do we decide like, oh, this isn't worth it, we're gonna have non-scalable Bitcoin, or hey, we're going to maybe introduce MEV and scale Bitcoin. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, so like the risk of MEV is we could lose like censorship resistance because MEV will inherently centralize miners, and then they can be like, okay, no more OFAC coins and blah blah blah. So yeah, I mean, I think doing like if we did self-custodial just for self-custodial stake and introduced MEV, that would be bad. I mean, this is similar to like the Bcash argument of like just make the blocks gigabytes big and then it'll be okay. Everyone can use layer 1. It's like, well, sure, everyone can use layer 1, but that introduces new problems where block propagation and running nodes are expensive and stuff. So yeah, I think we have to be like mindful about this of just don't do everything under the sun and accidentally get MEV. The thing is though, it's like Bitcoin I think is a lot harder to get MEV where we don't have this like global mutable state like Ethereum and stuff. So and contracts are end up being a lot more private in Bitcoin than Ethereum. So we have a better base to go off of. But I think also a concern is like if the MEV is coming, like Ordinals and BitVM might already have given us MEV, so maybe we are fucked now. But I mean, we can't undo those. Like, it's just a part of the world. So yeah.
Drive chain?
I mean, drive chain. If we do like, yeah, I mean, drive chain may just accidentally happen because of like OpCat or APO or any of these different soft forks we do. But like, I think like I used to be very against drive chains, but I think coming around to like maybe it's an okay thing that accidentally happens, but it won't be a real scaling solution. But yeah.
Have you done the math for the additions that require covenants, and are those actually enough to ameliorate the issues?
I have not done the math, but yeah, like I guess I can go back to my math slides. So yeah, I mean, so like for one thing, is like there's not enough Bitcoin for everyone. Like I said, 100K sats per person is half of all Bitcoin basically, and so at the end of the day, these covenants, if they're truly enforceable on chain, you need to have that final exit where it goes to yourself, and that's just not like doing UTXOs under 100K sats is like not doable. So like these mass exit scenarios kind of like just break everything. But at least like I ended this section with we can go from 8 billion to 8 million. Maybe with covenants we can bring that to 80 million. And we just add more like. Honestly, self-custodial for every single person on the planet is probably not going to happen. Just not even because of any scalability things, just because my mom doesn't want to know what a private key is and manage that stuff. But as long as we can make it so if anyone wants to self-custody, they can. And the affordability is kind of what we're getting at here. And I think we can get it to that point where not everyone will self-custody, but it'll be everyone who wants to can afford it, should be able to afford it. And I think that's doable if we get covenants. I mean, I haven't done the math, but I think we can get to those order of magnitude there. But yeah.
I was going to ask a similar thing, Ben. A lot of these criticisms about Lightning is just ultimately looking at base layer Bitcoin, how many people can actually have a UTXO. Mm-hmm. So in this covenant future you're talking about, you're thinking most people actually aren't unilaterally controlling their Bitcoin?
I mean, it's like define unilaterally control. Like, do you unilaterally control a Lightning channel? It's in a multi-sig. It's like you have the way to enforce it if you need to. I think like with all these covenant proposals, you can have like a Lightning channel that represents say like 1,000 people, and they're not going to just force close it every day, but if they need to, they can. So now you're like basically just like Lightning scaled payments where you now have like nearly infinite throughput, but we haven't solved like scaling users of everyone can own a Lightning channel, and covenants at least gives us a shot at trying to do that. And without it, it's like we're just hinging everything on custodians to scale users basically.
So I'm curious about you said like here's all the problems with Lightning and here's why Bitcoin doesn't scale, and so we need covenants. And it would be cool if you went into a little more detail about which specific usages of covenants you're sort of most excited about. Like you showed some graphics of like some vague designs for things. Well, maybe not all of them are vague, but yeah. Which of these are you most excited about? Like, what direction do you think we should? Like, as soon as we activate covenants, like, which things should we build?
I mean, honestly, like, I don't know. That's what everyone else is talking about here for the conference. Like, I'm just an app dev. But, like, I think the point I'm just trying to make here is, like, something needs to change because with the current trajectory on of just Lightning will not work. And, you know, I would, like, honestly, like, you know, scaling Lightning on its own with, like, LN symmetry and L2, like, that would be fantastic. Channel factories would be fantastic. But, like, I mean, like, the BitVM, like, sidechain stuff, like, I don't understand that one bit. But, you know, there's a lot of smart people talking about it, so I assume, you know, something cool could happen there. But I mean, like, honestly, it's like I haven't done the work to research every single different proposal, but it does seem like, you know, the current situation will not work, so we need to try something. So yeah, sorry, it's not a real answer, but.
Verge Alex 4 here. I want to ask you actually, because like one of my conclusion from your talk and something that I've been observing is like we have like basically two paths that are connected, but like we have the engineering path where like we can work on further protocols to be able to perhaps get optimizations and maybe unlock different layers of scaling. But we have like the market path where we kind of like iterate with what we have, and like, you know, we have like mints and whatnot, and some will fail, and like the market will figure out like, so like private enterprise will provide solutions for payments and all of that. And I'm gonna give you an opportunity here to maybe like shield Nostr a little bit as to like how you guys are actually viewing Nostr as sort of like this layer to allow people to establish kind of like you know, reduce the information asymmetry with regards to like the available solutions and how we can use reputation, kind of like web of trust ish type of stuff to allow for discovery of those solutions.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, like if we didn't get any soft forks, like I don't think Bitcoin's just gonna die. Like Fediman's pretty damn good, and like, you know, we have these other things like Arc and stuff that's gonna hopefully, you know, paper over this problem at least a little bit. And yeah, I mean, for like the theory is like, you know, with Fedimints, you know, this could hopefully scale Bitcoin if we needed to. And the hard part is, you know, which Fedimint do I pick? And yeah, for Muni, what we've been working on a lot is like, you know, trying to create web of trust things around that, where you can see here at the bottom, like this mint is recommended by these people. And that kind of helps with like, you know, bringing back like the free banking idea of every single person or every single bank is like competing against each other. They want to, you know, it's in their incentive to have the other bank go down so their users come and stuff. So, you know, keeping, you know, bringing back like free banking and the market structure there, like that worked for America in the past. It's, you know, the bad part was that the gold got rug pulled, but like if we can have these like Fedimints that, you know, are much harder to like rug pull, you know, the underlying asset, then it's a lot safer. It's just, you know, we take a lot of assumptions there, which is like why I would like to not have to hinge everything on Fedimint, but I think it is a viable solution if we have to.
Thank you.
I see Peter Todd. Just shout. Yeah, I mean, that's like the hard part of like, you know, all this Lightning channel stuff I did was like only the opening side. You know, you still need to close everything, and that's gonna, you know, that's 2 more UTXOs from each one of these. So I have not, but I imagine it's worse. And so yeah, I mean, that gets you. Yeah, exactly. Like at the end of the day, if you have the max exit, you go from like still needing to put every single person on the blockchain, which, you know, as we showed, you know, 8 billion people on the blockchain is 344 gigabytes of just the UTXO sets. So yeah, I mean, it's the max exit is a huge problem, and you know, luckily we haven't seen any of those yet on Lightning. But if we want to like, you know, have the optimistic case of just like hopefully it never happens, and you know, 99% of things never get force closed. But like, yeah, doing the math on like real max exits is. The thing is like, yeah, if we have a max exit, like probably no scaling solution works, which is why, you know, other things do. But, you know, we can have like layers on top of layers and stuff, and maybe that fixes it. But yeah, I mean, this is, you know, self-custody is kind of bearish in that regard too. All right. Oh, Buck.
I mean, isn't one of the things with covenants that it helps with the max exit? Because you can kind of like, it's a release valve for some of
Yeah. Like if you got to the scenario of like there's a million Fedi mints, like well those million Fedi mints still need to do some transactions on chain and stuff, and yeah, you run into issues. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like maybe covenants offer a way to you can instead of like doing the entire force close where everyone gets a single UTXO, like my like group of like 100 people be like, okay, let's not do the final force close and move back into the layer. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like all these are not fully researched problems, and I just think we just need to start moving in that direction because the current situation is like not going to scale 8 billion users, and that's what we're going for. We need to do something. Yeah. Alex.
When do you think we'll first start like really feeling these growing pains? Like we already kind of are, but I don't know. Do you have a sense on like when it's going to be actually a problem?
Yeah, I mean, last year for us at Mutiny, like it became a huge problem where like when fees were like consistently like 200 to 500 sats per VByte, basically our Lightning stuff was unusable unless you had like over a million sat channel because everything was just burned the fees. So I mean, we have felt that, yeah. Luckily ordinals hype is down, so it's not as much of a problem. But if this bull run happens again and we shoot up, it could fully well be back. So yeah, I think like we're kind of like reaching that point of like mempool never clears anymore, and if we just get that a little bit of uptick more with like on-chain activity, it could happen like any day now. So I mean, I think like a lot of people have realized like why everyone's here is like, okay, we were living in the good times, we could afford on-chain, now it's becoming more expensive, so we're all trying to get ready for that. But yeah, I think it is here. It's just not evenly distributed across the days. Like some days it's bad, some days it's okay. And I do think like it's we go a cycle or two and it's like it's game over. All right. Well, thank you everyone.